Twitless, what are we talking about today?
Well, we are revisiting some of our views about the recent 2025 Superman film by James Gunn, but we're also mostly focusing on whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which is a very important moment in Superman's history. It was the end of an era. So we're going to be taking a look at that storyline that crosses from Superman 423 and Action Comics 583, both in 1986 by Alan Moore, very well-known British comics author, part of the British comics invasion, known for Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and a bunch of other stuff. But also the artwork by Kurt Swan and George Perez. The storyline that essentially is meant to be a final storyline for Superman right before they relaunched that, like right afterwards, and restarted everything. So it's kind of an end point that's meant to launch into a new beginning, which we got with John Byrne in The Man of Steel.
Yeah, the two works are very interesting, the film and the comic here. Both do have a bit of a retrospective on the character and the universe as a whole. You definitely have to be familiar with a lot of Superman going into both. The book is kind of giving you a who's who of a lot of characters that have been in the Superman universe. He's having this last adventure with them as all of them gradually die off, oddly enough. But it's an Alan Moore story, so we got to be deconstructing stuff and making sure that everybody's quite miserable and pining for happier days once they're done reading the story. But in the movie, it's all very uplifting, and we have a lot of elements being introduced as set pieces throughout the film. All of them getting their own appropriate screen time and storytelling moments, where we are getting this good representative mosaic of Superman and what it's meant to so many of the readers and fans over so many years. So there's a nice juxtaposition there. You have the positive representation of Superman and all of his wonders that he experiences in his world versus the dour downtrend of that era and genre with Alan Moore's storytelling, wrapping things up before they pick up on a new Superman era that's kicked off by John Byrne shortly after.
I think I okay, this is gonna make me the villain of this video, I think I liked this. I think I did. I think I liked this more than other Alan Moore joints. I think. It's still hitting me. I just read it today for the first time. There's something that Alan Moore can do. Uh, there's something that Alan Moore can do with Superman that he can't quite achieve with other characters. I think when there's a little with the character is on a higher like moral tower, so to speak. I think it really does kind of lift him up a little bit above where he normally puts himself with his more cynical original works. And even though he is deconstructing, even though it does feel like he, some could validly say that he doesn't understand the superhero genre, at least the American superhero genre, or resents it maybe. Uh, I don't think he's able to do as much damage. I don't think he expects as much. I think he expects something a little slightly different of himself when he's approaching Superman. That's kind of the vibe I got from this. I'm kind of surprised I'm saying this because I typically don't like Alan Moore, and I'm constantly perplexed by Superman. What the appeal is, in a weird way, like sunsetting this like Silver Age era, right? That's what this particular era was meant to draw to a close intentionally. I the way it was done feels more it feels more respectful in a way that I think I've seen from other Alan Moore stuff, and honestly was a little uh, deeper, I think, than a lot of the films that we've seen from Superman, at least. So there was some complexity and serious tragedy that was explored. It almost felt respectful in a way, which is crazy to say from Alan Moore because you sometimes it feels like he doesn't respect anything, right, except himself. I really don't think that was the case with this one. How crazy am I?
About half.
Yeah.
No.
I'm
Appropriate
still
for an
reading
Alan
through it
Moore.
myself. Like,
Appropriate for an
convince
Alan
me
Moore
otherwise.
story.
Yeah. So the if I can expand a little on kind of what happens here, the basic pitch is that this is meant to be, like I said, even kind of begins. He kind of announces what's going to happen. He's like, the story is going to be the final Superman story, and where all of his villains collect against him, and then he kind of like passes on essentially. And so what happens is a bunch of and this is I'm not going to bury the lead here. Alan Moore is technically gifted, and he is a craftsman, and you can always see the craft that he's doing. That being said, this is the kind of story where it's like, thanks, I hate it. And because at the end of the day, what this is essentially we have, again, serialized storytelling. We're dealing with Superman 423, 400 issues. You know what I mean? Superman has had arguably like the longest run in at least in superhero comics. He's had one of the longest runs ever, just in terms of serialized storytelling. It's I don't know if he is the longest running, but he's definitely up there in the top echelon. He's just been going on since 1938, and so you're talking about people who have read comics, who've followed him for years and years and years, and there's certain boundaries, I'd say, that are established, certain rules. And Alan Moore, because this is the last one, and just for a little bit of background, they actually approached Jerry Siegel, the creator of Superman, the writer, and they actually kind of floated him, hey, we're going to do this sort of like final send-off. Could you maybe do this? And apparently Siegel kind of like thought for a moment and was kind of like, I'm not sure. And there's something interesting about the creator being like, I don't know if I can do this to the thing I made. And then apparently the editor took it to Alan Moore, and Alan Moore like took a hold of him and said, if you do not let me do the death of Superman, essentially, I will kill you.
Right.
So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of the sort of background impetus here. And so the story is basically a whole bunch of everything that never is supposed to happen to Superman happens, like one right after the other. It is a series of essentially violations of all of the rules and formulas and tropes and everything that has been established for 500 issues. So like the first thing that happens is that Superman's secret identity gone. And then a bunch of villains start murdering people, which again is not something that we expect to see in superhero fiction, especially of this era. And then it ends with all the villains collecting characters like Lex, Brainiac, Kryptonite Man, Bizarro shows up earlier in the story. But basically the whole Rogues Gallery shows up at some point or another. And Superman ends up collecting his allies and kind of puts them in at this Fortress of Solitude, and a siege happens. And long story short, everybody dies, essentially. Almost nearly everyone dies. In some cases, in very grisly ways. The bloody dog, Crypto, dies. It's just they didn't even spare the dog. And at the very end of it, it's basically
I already told you I like it. You don't have to sell me. I'm sorry.
But again, like these were things people had read for decades at this point. We're talking from 1938 to 1986. Like I said, it ends up being, like I said, it kind of a thanks I hate it moment in a lot of ways. And I just that's
supposed
where
to
I'm
be
at
painful. Yeah.
Well, it's not a sweet send off for the era or the character at all. That's not a love letter in any way. And yeah, you're right. It is disgracing the memory that a lot of fans have built up and leaving them on this kind of dour and sour note. But I mean,
I was just going to say the interesting thing there is that Alan Moore can't even commit to that. Which is also kind of frustrating. So Alan Moore does this a lot, where it's like he's such an anarchist, he struggles to commit to his own bits. So the whole thing is like he's killing everyone, right, including Superman. Except the end of the story is wink, wink. Superman is technically still alive, and he didn't lose his powers probably, and he's literally winking at the camera at the very end. So like he actually does all of this bloodbath, but then tries to like salvage it with a sort of wink that undermines his own deconstruction. He actually he's such a deconstructionist. He deconstructs his own deconstruction. It's a pattern with Moore. He does it all the bloody time, and it's kind of weird that he's so committed to undercutting. He has to undercut his own undercuts.
And the most powerful figure on Earth couldn't even have like a grand confrontation as his final, final send off. He had to basically, for lack of a better term, he suicided himself. He goes into this room with the golden kryptonite. He devolves and removes all of his power, and then he walks out into the snow and supposedly freezes to death, which is the most anticlimactic end to Superman that you could possibly envision.
But who can take out Superman but Superman?
But it's an un-American way. The American way would to go out swinging. The British way is to have your empire just fade away into nothing, and you walk. This again, I told you. I was trying not to bring this up, but the Brits just can't resist having a British send off for an American character.
Is it deconstructionist, or is he also relying a little bit too heavily on just shock value? Of like, I bet you never thought this would happen. I bet you never thought crypto would get totally torn from, end to end. So I don't know. It's a classic tale, but I think it takes a lot of liberties.
So what's interesting is that as much as this story was memorable, you remember when in a serial format, you remember the episode where it broke all the rules, but that doesn't make it the best episode of that genre. What's interesting is that in the trade paperback edition of Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, they include some other Alan Moore stories, and there's one that I recommend much more highly, which is called For the Man That Has Everything, which is the story of the Black Mercy, the flower that gives you everything that you want, and Mongols involved with it. And they ended up doing a Justice League Unlimited episode on that very story. It's a much better story. It's Alan Moore operating at a much higher level, in my opinion, in Superman storytelling, and it's the one that culture actually remembers. What's interesting is the fact that as much as this story was kind of like, oh no, he didn't, and a lot of comic book readers remember it, culture doesn't remember the story at all. This one didn't actually make it into the pop culture and hasn't made it into the films. No one likes to see Brainiac on top of Lex Luthor, who's had his neck snapped, walking like a zombie. Like, Lex gets really, if you like Lex Luthor, you're not gonna like this one. Lex barely does anything before he gets his like neck like karate chopped, and then he's just walking around. He's being puppeted as a corpse by Brainiac. And like I said, no one wants to see that. And so it's interesting how, as memorable as the story is from one perspective, like culture did not take this one and do much with it.
Is it though still appropriate in the Superman storytelling vein of still adhering to some of the rules of the way these stories are usually presented? There isn't a strong narrative or throughput happening throughout. There's kind of just these events and these monumental figures and moments that you are familiar with and you're interested in, and just being presented kind of piecemeal, which is kind of a funny word because that's how I described the Superman film. But in that sense, like, there is a bit of that Superman approach here in the writing and in the storytelling.
So, what's interesting is that this is as much as Alan Moore is technically gifted, this story is held together by the thinnest of ultimately it's held together by the thinnest justification. So the whole thing is like all these villains get together and they're assaulting the Fortress of Solitude, and the natural consideration most comic book readers have is where's the Justice League? Like, you couldn't just have all of the villains publicly attack the Fortress of Solitude without having Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and like a whole bunch of other heavy hitters show up and help. And Brainiac makes a force field so that they can't penetrate it. All right, that's okay, fine. And then they disable the force field, and the force field doesn't come down. Brainiac's like, I don't even know what's going on, which is kind of weird for Brainiac to say. And then ultimately, the entire story, all the things that have happened that have been like kind of like weird and out of character, because like the story starts with Toyman and Prankster killing people. These were not murderers. And the whole thing is held together by, well, it's actually the interdimensional imp Mixley Plitlick, unpronounceable name, and it's actually him turning evil, and he's been doing everything by magic, which is the weakest sort of justification for holding your plot and story together, which is just like, oh, it's just magic. So anytime you run into I don't know if this would happen, y'all, it's like, well, magic, and it's just like, really, Alan Moore, that's the best you could come up with, is just like, magic.
Right.
So
he has a so
right, but it's and I'm fine with magic being a part of the story. It's just it ends up being a bit of a cop out in the way Alan Moore is utilizing it here, because it's just like he's just like, oh, why did Prankster and Toyman turn out to be murderers and not remember anything? Well, Mixolydic did magic. Why does the force field stay up when they've disabled it? Well, it's because Mixolydic used magic, and it's just like, this is weaker storytelling from a writer who's known for being smarter than that.
At least it wasn't all a dream.
Yeah, I almost wish this one's a dream.
Do you guys think that, like, why was this published to begin with? Was it that Superman in the mid '80s was thought to have, even by DC themselves, had thought like maybe he'd overstayed his welcome?
It's
that they should have done this sooner, and they were kind of stuck, and they wanted to reboot, and they felt like this had gone on for too long, so we need to do something crazy and 80s like, and bring in a British person to do it just to blow it up.
So this is part of the aftermath of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and so what the background here essentially is that because back in the day, like Marvel's sort of interconnecting everything was kind of new. So back in the day, everyone was kind of telling their own stories with their own continuities, and later on they're like, hey, let's cross over these characters, which then leads to a bunch of problems when you're trying to reconcile continuity. And so over the spans of hundreds of issues, you ended up having quite a lot of continuity, and you ended up having an entire multiverse. You had Earth 1, you had Earth 2, you had all these different Earths to try and reconcile some of these incongruencies that showed up over time. And so to, puzzle all that out between, Superman's golden age and silver age, and then later on into the bronze, which is kind of where we're dealing with here, I think. And so you had a bunch of stuff. And obviously for new readers, that became even more difficult. And so you had Marv Wolfman, who's called in to do Crisis of Infinite Earths in, I think, 1 year before this. So it's 1985, I believe, and which is basically at the end of that, which is a very interesting story to look at now, but it was I think it's considered to be one of the first intercompany crossovers. I think there's like almost like a close run between that and Marvel's Secret War. But basically this idea of taking all your superheroes and just having them do a whole bunch in a giant crossover. But at the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, they simplified everything. They streamlined it. They relaunched the entire continuity of DC, and they basically eliminate all of those extra Earths, all those extra backgrounds. Everyone's on one Earth, one origin story. We're rebooting everything, and so what they're doing here is they're essentially tying they're tying tying a bow around this so that they can relaunch and everybody can be on board with their new continuity. But to your point, Matt, I feel like they took this as an opportunity to blow it up, because this is the opportunity. One of the things that's mentioned in the foreword to the trade paperback is the fact that this is the type of story they'd never have a chance to tell again. And so they decided to seize that opportunity. We're never going to be able to do it this again. We're never going to be, and that's true to this day. They were never riding on like 50 years of continuity, and then we're gonna, for the first time ever, we're going to streamline, reboot it, and we're going to tell a final Superman story. And so I think that's the other reason why Alan Moore seized it as well. I think he saw the opportunity that he was going to have, because this is the type of story he'd never be allowed to do in any other way. I think you're onto something with some of the impetus behind this, but a lot of it comes from what DC was doing at the time to try and streamline things for the next generation.
I wonder if like the single continuous thread, though, that carries you throughout this entire story is the morality of Superman, is the character himself, the archetype that everybody is so familiar with, they're endeared to, and they connect with. And so you can put him through all of this insane events where his entire world is being deconstructed around him. His own existence is being questioned at the very end and what it's defined by. But the constancy of that character, the single-mindedness of he is this moral figure defiantly, despite all of these other factors, that is actually the one true North Star for any kind of Superman story that you're reading, that would basically guide you through all the way to the conclusion.
Yeah, that spirit is definitely one thing that I like is the fact that Superman does seem to be written in character, even though other characters are not, and then it's explained as magic. But Superman and his surrounding cast are pretty on point. You have Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, and they're just like, his bestest friends are willing to put down their lives, and they lose it because of that. Lois Lane loves him, and we finally do get a sort of like and I say finally because what's interesting is the fact that they've actually told this story before in the Silver Age. Back in the Silver Age, they would do these what ifs, essentially. And so what if Superman got married and kind of gave up being a superhero? Those kinds of things where they would try to like give an ending to a story that is not supposed to have an end. And they've done that multiple times in the Silver Age. I actually highly recommend Superman 149, which is the first time they killed off Superman. And it does a lot of things this story does, but it's Jerry Siegel, and he does it a lot better. In that story, Superman dies because he's such a believer in humanity. He's able to rehabilitate. He thinks he's rehabilitated Lex Luthor, and Lex backstabs him. It's betrayal. Betrayal is what kills Superman in that story. And then Supergirl takes on his mantle at the end and brings him to justice. And he faces a Nuremberg-style trial for his crimes. It's not just a bloodbath. He actually faces justice. Has to face a trial. There's a certain. What's interesting is this story, although it's a bloodbath, that story from from the Silver Age, it hits actually, I think it's 1961, hits way harder in my opinion. But yeah, Superman's character, his devotion to humanity and to preserving life is one of the animate things. It's the thing that makes him give up being Superman, go into the gold kryptonite room, because he says, I violated my oath. Yeah. And to revisit the film, it's one of the things that was one of the strongest aspects of the film's character, was the fact that he's like, I don't want people to die. And now he's not as absolutist in the film. In the film, he's like, okay, if we have to kill the giant monster, can at least we do it in a way that is painless and considerate?
Yeah, can we have euthanized it in a nicer way? Yeah. Honestly, I don't think that's a part of his lore as much as people understand Batman, or to be like a no-kill kind of guy.
Right.
It's kind of funny to bring that back to popular consciousness.
But Superman will take the moment to go and save the squirrel, given the opportunity. So clearly it's a very strong impetus for the character.
It is. It's evolved over time. Both Batman and Superman in the Golden Age are much more comfortable with killing, and do so in Golden Age. But so that consciousness evolved over time. Part of that is the comics code and some other cultural things going on. But it is strong, and the film tries to carry over as much of that as possible. Which is interesting when you compare that to, like, for example, the Snyder film, which really made a like, the thing that everyone remembers from that film is Superman snapping a guy's neck. So it's like the thing that's burned into your head, whether it's whether you can justify it or not in terms of the film. But in this comic and in the new film, they really have tried their best to lean into I just have to say, a pro-life Superman who's in the story, whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, he's so committed to it, he's willing to essentially commit seppuku for breaking that oath, to kill a demon, essentially, at that point in the story. Mixley is literally a demon by that point. He changes form into just a giant magical demon, but that's still enough. So it's interesting to see how the film and this comic are both really committed into that aspect of his character.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people didn't understand in the film. For example, they always question that one scene where he's upset about his dog going missing, and why is he in Lex Luthor's office and throwing tables around? But he has that single-mindedness of like, this is wrong, and I'm obligated to correct the wrong thing. Almost, an OCD approach of like, I'm not able to switch this off, and I have to fix the wrong thing. Regardless of how minor it might be perceived. And he views it as a huge reflection on himself as a character, as a person, as a man. And he very much wants to embody this definition of a man that he's struggling so hard to maintain, despite being the superior being. So at the end, he has the moment with Lex Luthor in the film where he tries to emphasize this to Luthor because he's constantly being framed as an alien thing, as something. He's always having his powers and his status and his abilities put at the forefront of who he is, but he desperately he insists upon being a man, and he doesn't even want his conflicts to be framed in the setting of, fine, he has these superpowers. No, I'm a man. You have to engage me. You have to confront me. You have to challenge me on these terms because this is who I am.
That's really good. Mm-hmm.
Amen. I love it. Well said.
Yeah.
And that impetus. And as much as I struggle with this story, there is that core is running through the bloodbath. At least in Superman, is character, because like I said, he's so committed still to his mission that it ends up being the impetus for why he stops, why Superman dies. Whether or not Clark dies is the sort of wink wink at the end, which no, he didn't.
I think that's why I kind of liked it, because even if they broke the story world of Superman, and they may have broken many of the villains to achieve that, Alan Moore couldn't break Superman.
That's no.
Do you know what I mean? I think he still had, like, he winks at you at the end of the story. Kurt Swan has him drawn with a wink. And that, maybe he's getting out, he's subverting his own expectations with the story. But it also feels like Alan Moore's kind of winking at us, saying, like, I still care about this character, even though I'm a son of a bitch. You know what I mean? Like, I hope you enjoyed this because I had a blast because Superman's cool. Like, that's the vibe I got. There's other ways to kill off, to end an arc, to end 50 years of storytelling with Superman.
Well,
I didn't expect this. This felt a little more respectful of the man, if not all the other stuff completely valid, the other criticisms, but the man Superman persist, like, he survived this and got sent off, I think, himself in a respectful way.
It's a testament to the archetype, because despite the attempt to deconstruct him in a fundamental way here, despite the attempt to deconstruct him in the Snyder films in a very overt way, and your perception and understanding of what the character is, he's still preserved in the Gunn films. And there's something timeless in him that is just cannot be deconstructed. Survived Snyder and he survived Alan Moore. He's defiant.
I love him.
He's the man of steel. Like, you just can't bend him. Yeah.
And there's something about that that's so genuinely American about our spirit. It's the idea that we refuse. There's a spirit. I'm not even talking about if it's true, that it's a myth that we have an indomitable spirit that will refuse to compromise, in a positive way. And so that's a genuine American aspect, and not even Alan Moore could fully kill it in the story. He doesn't even really try. So you're right. In that sense, he does a lot of Alan Moore bloodbath kind of subversions here. But in the end, like, he has to end with the wink, because it's Superman. So,
final analysis. Well read. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed aspects of the story as a whole. It didn't quite land for me. I did think the conclusion was interesting, but it probably wasn't the greatest homage to the character. It wasn't really what it should have been. There's a lot of creative, imaginative attributes in the story and Superman-esque things. So it's nice to see that milieu of history kind of be all presented here in this tapestry. The one question I had, there's a statue that's used as part of the story to basically as a plot point, and it says for the Supreme moment, the word Supreme appears on it, and I believe that there is some backstory of a bunch of Superman stories that Alan Moore wrote that were never published, and the reason why he ended up writing Supreme, the character at Image, was because he wanted to publish these stories, and he just took these Superman stories and went and sold them to Rob Liefeld instead. So I don't know if this was a very early seeding of some of that intent. But yeah, of writing a character or having a character named Supreme at some point be a stand-in to tell the stories that he wanted to tell. But that was in there. So that was very interesting to see. As far as the film, so in terms of a retrospective, it's very understandable, especially reading a story like this, why it embodies so many of the timeless qualities, why there's such a strong, visceral, I think, response from so many people, because there are things, there are aspects of it that are indelible. I think within people, it draws something out that is very uniquely identifiable, and is kind of just perfectly embodied within this representation of this character. And whatever structural issues you might have concerns with in terms of storytelling, in terms of film presentation, those indelible attributes are what scream through on the screen. And that is the reason why I think people identify with the film so strongly, given all of this history, given all of these experimentations that we've seen with the character. Still that element is preserved, and that is the reason why people still identify and respond so strongly to seeing him presented to us within these stories.
Yeah, well said. How about you, Twitless? What
Yeah, I can't.
What are your
I don't
final
think
thoughts?
I can't top that. I was just not. I've been.
Yeah,
You can't see. I've been nodding vigorously because no, you pegged that about 100%. That's yeah. I think the only thing I can add is golly. I respect Alan Moore as a storyteller, and there are better Superman stories that he has told. I've never liked this one. I understand why it was told, the opportunity that was taken here. Again, I do recommend Superman 149 as a better version of essentially trying to kill off Superman in a wink wink kind of a way. Um, like I said, Alan Moore's technical quality, some of Alan Moore's technical qualities are on display, but some of them are actually not. So I think even in terms of the craftsmanship, some of it is weaker. But I do completely co-sign everything that Well Red just said, which is there's still a thread, there's still a core to the character that runs through this story that connects to why people are so resonant with the film. And I also think that it also synergizes with where a lot of people in America are. I think, like I said, the Snyder film talks about hope, but the film itself and the language it communicates in is still very dour and dark. The Snyderverse is known for being tonally dark and traumatic, actually. And it's very clear that after at least 10 years or so of people being down in the dumps, that people are want to change. They want the return of a golden savior figure, and who is driven by the need to do right and preserve life in a very American way. And I think that thread is still detectable in this story. So that's still, I don't know if that reflects on Alan Moore's writing or more just the character that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster came up with, that dream of the two kids from Cleveland. But it still shines here. It shines very strongly in the movie. It's overpowering. That's why I had a dumb childish grin on my face for 2 days afterwards. Final notes. I think this is an important story to read. If you're a Superman fan, you kind of have to read Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow at some point. You can't. It's something you have to do. Not my favorite though. Not by a long shot.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.